So here we're looking at the retina in green. The optic nerve here is leaving the eye. That's the second cranial nerve, taking the visual information in towards the brain. But where the optic nerve leaves the eye, there's no light sensitive cells. So this area is described as the blind spot because we can't detect vision in that particular spot. The macula lutea is the bit that's in the direct line of sight. And that's very high in the very sensitive cone cells. The cone cells are the high resolution cells. Altogether, the eye contains about 6 million cone cells. There's also 120 million rod cells that detect dimmer light and slightly less resolution, or less resolution than the cones. But here there's a high density of cones, so very good visual acuity in that area. It's called the yellow spot. It's not very yellow actually, but that's what it's called. But at the centre of that, there is the Fovea Centralis, which is purely cones, nothing else. That depression there, in direct line of sight. And this whole structure in green is the retina. Now the retina does extend forward, but as the non-visual retina lining the ciliary body and the inside of the iris. But that's non-visual. Doesn't contain the light sensitive cells. Now if we think about this in a bit more detail, the retina is in two layers. So firstly on the outside we have the choroid. The choroid layer. And what we've done in these talks is we've drawn that in red. We'll maintain that. Have that in red. See the red choroid layer in the original diagram. And the retina is in two layers. The pigmented retina pigmented layer, and on top of that the neural layer. And we drew the retina of course in green, so let's maintain that tradition. The pigmented layer next to the choroid and the neural layer above that. So the outer pigmented layer contains melanocytes and melanin, this layer here, to absorb any excess light. Actually, people with albinism, albinos, don't produce the melanin, and they do get dazzled by light quite readily because the light rays can bounce around inside the eyeball if they're not absorbed efficiently by the melanin. So it's firmly attached to the choroid, and it continues anteriorly as the non-visual retinas are said to cover the internal surfaces of the ciliary body and iris. So we know that. Now the inner neural layer is the visual or the optic part of the retina. This is where all the light sensitive cells are located that take part in this process of transduction, lining the posterior 3/4 of the eyeball. So this is all the visual retina here, lining the back of the eyeball. Contains the rods and cone cells. And these are responsible for what's called transduction, transforming one form of energy into another. So they transform the electromagnetic radiation, which is the light energy, into electrochemical potentials, nerve impulses that travel in the optic nerve to the brain, the second cranial nerve, the optic nerve. So the retina, the visual retina, is the beginning of the neurological visual pathway. And it's actually, if you have a condition called a detached retina, what happens in a detached retina is that the visual layer separates from the pigmented layer. So this layer will separate, it will come away, and there will be a gap. That's the condition of detached retina. So detached retina is when the neural layer separates from the pigmented layer below. And of course that's an immediate sight-threatening condition that needs immediate medical attention. And the retina is interesting because it's the only part of the body where the blood vessels can be viewed directly. So we have the central retinal artery and the central retinal vein, and we can see the blood vessels. If we look through here with the ophthalmoscope, we can see the blood vessels directly. And with practice we can recognise hypertensive changes, we can recognise diabetes. And we can visualise the optic disc where the optic nerve leaves the eye. The optic disc is the blind spot. It's lighter coloured. And with a bit of practice we can see the difference in tone of the macula with the central depression of the fovea, which you can't really see with an ophthalmoscope. But you can see this area is a different tone in colour. So when you get the chance, do look at retinas with an ophthalmoscope. Take someone into a darkened room. Don't have the ophthalmoscope on full though, because it's very glary. Turn the light down and you'll find that the retina is indeed a very beautiful structure. There's many amazing things about the retina. I'm not going to go into detail in this clip. We'll talk about it in another clip. But we'll notice in the future that there's 3 layers: the photoreceptors, the bipolar cell layer and the ganglion layer. And for most of it, the ganglions are on the outside. It's just the fovea where the cones are exposed directly. But yeah, it gives us this amazing resolution. And the retina is also a very energy demanding tissue. It's very metabolically active for its size, as it transducts these light rays into electrical neuronal information, taking that information off towards the visual areas of the brain as nerve impulses in the optic nerve. So the retina, the light sensitive retina, is the organ of transduction, giving us this vital information about the outside world.